The cold stone floor hurt Vorthak's small body as he lay chained in the temple dungeon. His silver scales caught the dim light from the torches, making them shine like tiny mirrors. The other dragons said his scales were cursed. They said he was born wrong. Today they would kill him because of it. Above him, heavy footsteps echoed through the temple halls. The dragon lords were preparing for the sacred ritual. Every year they chose the weak hatchlings and the different ones. They killed them to please Malthrex, their war god. The priest said it made the empire stronger. Vorthak did not understand how killing babies made anyone strong, but no one asked what a cursed hatchling thought. The young dragon was only 3 months old, but he was already bigger than a large dog. His silver scales should have been black like all proper Draconi warriors. His eyes should have been red like burning coals. Instead, they were blue like the sky on the human world he had heard the guards talk about. Everything about him was wrong. Far across the galaxy, 10-year-old Han Sol pressed her face against the cold metal bars of the slave ship. Through the small window, she could see stars spinning past. She had been on this ship for 2 weeks now, ever since the dragon soldiers came to Earth. They took her and many other children from Sol. Her parents had tried to hide her, but the dragons had strange machines that could find humans anywhere. Sol was small for her age, with short black hair and determined eyes. She did not cry like some of the other children. She watched everything. She listened to the dragon guards talking in their rough language. She was learning their words, even though they called humans too stupid to understand. The ship finally stopped at a huge space station orbiting a red planet. Dragon soldiers pushed the human children into transport pods. Sol counted 43 children from Earth, all between 8 and 12 years old. The dragon said young humans made the best slaves because they learned fast and did not fight back. Sol planned to prove them wrong about the fighting part. The red planet was called Corvash. It was the holy world of the Dragon Empire. Massive temples made of black stone reached toward the burning sky. The buildings were so tall they disappeared into the red clouds above. Everything smelled like sulfur and smoke. The air was thin and made Sol's chest hurt when she breathed. Dragon guards marched the human children through wide streets paved with dark metal. Tall dragon citizens walked past without looking at them. To the dragons, humans were just another type of animal. Sol saw other alien slaves too. Blue-skinned people with 4 arms. Creatures that looked like walking trees, beings made of living crystal that sparkled in the red sunlight. All of them kept their eyes down and moved quickly. The great temple stood at the center of the city. It was a massive pyramid with steps leading up to a flat top where smoke rose from burning fires. Carved dragons wrapped around the outside walls, their stone eyes seeming to watch everything. The children were pushed into a side entrance that led to underground chambers. In the temple dungeon, Vorthak heard new voices speaking in a language he did not know. The guards were bringing someone down the stone steps. He lifted his small head and saw them pushing strange creatures into the cells across from his. They walked on 2 legs like dragons, but they were tiny and had no scales. Their skin was different colors, some pale, some dark. They had hair on their heads instead of horns. One of the small creatures was put in the cell directly across from Vorthak. It was a young female with dark hair and bright eyes. She did not cower in the corner like the others. Instead, she came to the front of her cell and looked right at him. Most creatures were afraid when they saw a dragon, even a small one. This one just stared at him with curiosity. Sol could not believe what she was seeing. A baby dragon with silver scales was chained up across from her cell. She had heard about dragons from the stories her grandmother told. But those were just fairy tales. This dragon was real and it looked hurt. There were cuts on its scales where chains had rubbed against them. Its blue eyes looked sad and tired. The dragon was beautiful in a way that made Sol's heart ache. Its scales shimmered like moonlight on water. Its small wings were folded against its back. It was not much bigger than the large dog she had seen in Sol, but she could tell it would grow to be massive someday. If it lived that long. Other human children whispered in Korean asking what the creature was. Sol shushed them. She had figured out that the dragon guards understood more human languages than they let on. It was safer to stay quiet and watch. High Priest Maltharok descended into the dungeon as the sun reached its highest point. He was an ancient dragon with black scales that looked like polished stone. His red eyes glowed in the torchlight. Behind him walked younger priests carrying ceremonial knives and golden bowls. The ritual was about to begin. The high priest stopped at Vorthak's cell and spoke in the old dragon language. His words echoed off the stone walls like thunder. Soul could not understand the words, but she understood the tone. It was the voice of someone who enjoyed causing pain. Guards unlocked Vorthak's cell and dragged him out by his chains. The little dragon did not fight. He had been beaten too many times for trying to resist. His small claws scratched against the stone floor as they pulled him toward the steps leading up to the temple. More guards came for the human children. Soul felt rough claws grab her arms and lift her off the ground. The guards were taking them up to watch the ritual. They wanted the human slaves to see what happened to creatures who were born different. It was meant to scare them into obedience. The temple's main chamber was huge, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Hundreds of dragons sat on stone benches arranged in circles around a raised platform in the center. Adult dragons were enormous, some as big as trucks. Their scales gleamed in the light from burning torches mounted on the walls, their red eyes all focused on the platform where the ritual would happen. Human children were forced to stand in a special area near the front. They were meant to have the best view of what was about to happen. Soul found herself pushed to the front row, directly facing the stone altar where dragon priests were laying out their ceremonial tools. 4 dragon guards carried Vorthak up the steps to the platform. The little dragon's silver scales caught the firelight and threw tiny rainbows on the dark walls. He was placed on the altar, and thick chains were wrapped around his body to hold him still. His blue eyes looked out over the crowd of dragons watching him. High Priest Maltharok raised his arms and began chanting in the ancient language. His voice boomed through the chamber, echoing off the stone walls. The other dragons joined in, their voices creating a sound like distant thunder. Saul felt the vibrations in her bones. The chanting grew louder. Maltharok picked up a curved knife made of black metal. The blade reflected the fire like dark water. He held it high above his head while the dragons chanted faster. The knife began to glow with red light, powered by the priest's magic. Soul looked at Vorthak on the altar. The little dragon was not struggling anymore. He just lay there with his eyes closed, waiting to die. Something inside Soul's chest felt like it was breaking. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. The chanting reached its peak. Maltharok brought the glowing knife down toward Vorthak's neck. In that moment, Soul made a choice that would change the galaxy forever. She broke free from the guard holding her and ran toward the altar, shouting in her broken dragon language, "This is wrong. This is wrong, stop!" The temple fell silent. Every dragon eye turned to look at the small human girl who dared to interrupt their sacred ritual. Soul reached the altar and threw herself over Vorthak's body, spreading her arms to protect him. The little dragon opened his blue eyes and looked at her in amazement. High Priest Maltharok stared down at her with burning red eyes. In all his centuries of life, no creature had ever dared to interfere with the ritual of sacrifice, especially not a tiny human slave who should have been cowering in fear. "Move away, little animal," he said in perfect Korean, his voice like grinding stone, "or you will die with the cursed one." Soul looked up at the massive dragon priest towering over her. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like a drum in her chest. Her hands were shaking, but she did not move away from Vorthak. "I will not move," she said, switching to the dragon language she had been learning. "Killing babies does not make you strong. It makes you weak." The words hung in the air like smoke. Around the temple, dragons shifted uneasily. No one had ever called them weak before, especially not a human child. Maltharok raised his knife again, his eyes blazing with fury. But as the blade began to descend, something impossible happened. Vorthak's silver scales began to glow with their own light. The glow spread to Saul's skin where she touched him. A connection formed between them, deeper than thought, stronger than fear. The light grew brighter and brighter until it filled the entire temple. When the light faded, everything had changed. Soul could feel Vorthak's thoughts in her mind. He could sense her emotions in his heart. They were no longer just a human girl and a dragon hatchling. They were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. And in that moment, the revolution began. The light from Soul and Vorthak's bond faded slowly, leaving the temple in shocked silence. Dragons sat frozen on their stone benches, staring at something they had never seen before. High Priest Maltharok stepped back from the altar, his red eyes wide with confusion and fear. In all his long life, he had never witnessed magic like this. Soul felt different. She could sense Vorthak's thoughts like whispers in her mind. The young dragon was no longer afraid. Through their connection, he felt her courage flowing into him like warm water. For the first time since his birth, he felt strong. Chaos erupted in the temple. Some dragons roared in anger. demanding the death of both the cursed hatchling and the human who had interfered. Others whispered among themselves, remembering old stories about bonds between different creatures. The younger dragons seemed curious while the older ones looked terrified. In the confusion, Sul saw her chance. She grabbed the chains holding Vorthak and pulled with strength she did not know she had. The metal links snapped like dry twigs. Vorthak spread his small wings and jumped from the altar. Together they ran toward a side passage Sul had noticed when the guards brought her in. Dragon guards tried to stop them, but something strange happened when they got close. Vorthak's scales flashed with silver light, and the guards stumbled backward as if pushed by invisible hands. Their armor sparked and smoked. Their weapons stopped working. The little dragon's scales seemed to break their technology somehow. Sul and Vorthak reached the side passage and disappeared into the dark tunnels beneath the temple. Behind them, Maltharok's voice boomed through the chamber, ordering every guard in the city to find them. But the tunnels were old and went deep into the planet's core. Many passages had been forgotten for centuries. The tunnels were dark and cold. Water dripped from the stone ceiling and strange sounds echoed from the depths. Sul held on to Vorthak's warm scales as they walked through the blackness. She was not afraid of the dark anymore. With Vorthak beside her, she felt like she could face anything. They walked for hours, following passages that led deeper underground. Sul's legs were tired and her feet hurt, but she did not complain. Through their bond, she felt Vorthak's determination to keep going. He had spent his whole life in chains, and now he was finally free. Eventually, they saw light ahead. Not the red glow of dragon fire, but the softer yellow light of electric lamps. Voices speaking in Korean drifted through the tunnels. Sul's heart jumped with hope. Other humans were down here. They emerged into a large underground chamber carved from the living rock. Electric cables ran along the walls, powering lights and machines. About 30 humans were gathered around tables working on various projects. Some were repairing weapons. Others were studying maps of the city above. The humans looked up as Sul and Vorthak entered the chamber. Most of them stepped back in fear when they saw the young dragon, but one man walked forward without hesitation. He was tall and strong-looking, with graying hair and kind eyes. His clothes were torn and dirty, but he carried himself like a soldier. "My name is Park Jin," he said in Korean, then switched to the dragon language. "You must be the ones causing all the excitement up there. Half the city guards are searching for a human girl and a silver dragon." Sul was amazed that he could speak both languages so well. She had been working hard just to learn a few dragon words. "How do you know their language?" she asked. "I have been down here for 3 years," Park Jin replied. "You learn fast when your life depends on it. I was a colonel in the Korean military when the dragons first came to Earth. They captured me during the invasion of Seoul." He looked at Vorthak with curiosity rather than fear. The young dragon had grown larger during their escape, now about the size of a pony. His silver scales gleamed in the electric light. "I have never seen a dragon with scales like that," Park Jin said. "And I have never heard of a dragon helping a human." "We are connected," Sul said, not sure how to explain what had happened. "When I touched him, something changed. I can feel what he feels. He can sense what I think." An older woman approached them. She had short gray hair and wore the white coat of a scientist. "My name is Dr. Kim Hae," she said. "I study alien life forms. What you are describing should be impossible. Dragons and humans are completely different species." She examined Vorthak carefully, taking notes in a small book. The dragon allowed her to touch his scales and look at his eyes. Through their bond, Sul knew he was not afraid of the human doctor. "Remarkable," Dr. Kim muttered. "His scale structure is unlike any dragon I have studied." "And these neural patterns, what does that mean?" Sul asked. "I think your dragon friend is not like the others," Dr. Kim replied. "His brain works differently. Maybe that is why he could form this bond with you." Park Jin gathered the other humans around them. Sul saw people of all ages, from teenagers to elderly grandparents. There was Choi Min, a young woman who had been an engineer before the dragons took her. She was working on strange devices that looked like dragon weapons but had been changed somehow. "We call ourselves the Underground," Park Jin explained. "We are humans who escaped from the slave camps. Some dragon citizens help us too, though they must be careful. The Empire kills any dragon who shows kindness to other species." He pointed to a teenage girl working at a computer terminal. "That is Lee Da. She has a gift for understanding alien technology. She figured out how to hack into the dragon communication networks." Lee Da looked up from her work and smiled. She was about Soul's age, with bright eyes and quick hands. "I heard about what happened in the temple," she said. "The whole city is talking about it. Some dragons are calling it a sign from their old gods." "What old gods?" Saul asked. Dr. Kim answered. "Long ago, the dragons worshipped gods of wisdom and peace. But when they built their empire, they changed to worshipping Malthrex, the god of war. The old stories speak of a time when dragons lived in harmony with other creatures. Through the evening, Saul learned about life in the underground. The humans had built a hidden city in the old tunnels beneath Corvash. They grew food in underground gardens lit by stolen dragon technology. They made weapons from scrap metal and broken machines. Most importantly, they had hope. Park Jin showed Sul and Vorthak around their base. There were sleeping areas carved into the rock walls, a medical station where injured humans could heal, and a workshop where they built tools and weapons. Everything was simple but well organized. "How do you fight the dragons?" Saul asked. "They are so much bigger and stronger than humans." "We do not fight them directly," Choi-min explained. "We use hit-and-run tactics. We sabotage their machines. We free other slaves when we can, small actions that add up over time. But now we have something new," Park Jin said, looking at Sul and Vorthak. "A bond between species that should not be possible. This could change everything." Over the next few days, Sul and Vorthak trained with the underground fighters. Saul learned to use simple weapons and how to move quietly through the tunnels. Vorthak practiced controlling his strange powers. When he concentrated, his scales could disrupt dragon technology from a distance. Li Da was fascinated by Vorthak's abilities. She ran tests to understand how his scales affected electronic devices. "It is like he creates an energy field," she explained to Sul. "Dragon technology relies on psychic control systems. Your dragon friend's scales seem to block those signals." The underground began planning small missions using Saul and Vorthak as their secret weapon. Their first target was a slave transport station on the edge of the city. Dragon guards used psychic control devices to keep prisoners docile during transport. With Vorthak's help, they could disable those devices and free the prisoners. The mission went better than anyone expected. Vorthak's presence made the guards' weapons malfunction. Saul, guided by the tactical knowledge flowing from their bond, led the freed slaves through escape routes she somehow knew by instinct. They rescued 40 prisoners, including 20 humans and several other alien species, but their success came at a cost. War Commander Gorthak, son of High Priest Maltharok, took personal command of the search for them. He was younger than his father, but twice as cruel. The commander had studied human tactics and knew how to hunt in the underground tunnels. "He will not stop until he finds us," Park Jin warned during a strategy meeting. "The commander sees your bond as an insult to dragon superiority. He will kill you both to prove that humans are just animals." Sol felt afraid, but through her connection with Vorthak, she also felt something else. The young dragon had grown stronger and more confident. His scales now glowed brighter when he used his powers. More importantly, he was no longer the frightened hatchling who had waited to die on the temple altar. "Let him come," Sul said, surprising herself with her own courage. "We will be ready." That night, as Sul slept on her simple bed in the underground hideout, she dreamed of stars and distant worlds. In her dreams, she saw other humans forming impossible connections with alien creatures across the galaxy. She saw hope spreading like light through the darkness of the Dragon Empire. When she woke, she knew their story was just beginning. The bond between a human girl and a dragon hatchling would grow into something that could shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. But first, they had to survive what was coming. War Commander Gorthak was already on his way down into the tunnels, and he was bringing an army. 3 weeks had passed since Sul and Vorthak escaped from the temple. The young dragon was now as tall as a horse, his silver scales shining brighter each day. The bond between him and Sul grew stronger too. They could share thoughts across long distances and feel each other's emotions like their own feelings. In the underground hideout, Li Da worked at her computer station with excitement in her eyes. She had been monitoring dragon communication channels when something amazing happened. Messages were coming in from across the galaxy, all talking about the same impossible thing. "Park Jin, you need to see this," she called out, her voice shaking with wonder. The former colonel hurried over, followed by Sol and Vorthak. Dr. Kim Hae joined them, still carrying the notes she had been writing about dragon biology. The computer screen showed dozens of messages in different alien languages. "What am I looking at?" Park Jin asked. Li Da pointed to the translated text scrolling down the screen. Reports from 20 different star systems. Humans are forming bonds with alien creatures everywhere. It is happening all across the Empire. Sol felt her heart race. Through her connection with Vorthak, she sensed his excitement too. They were not alone. Other humans were discovering the same power that had saved them in the temple. This message is from the mining planet Xerion, Li Da continued, reading from the screen. A human boy named Nam Wu formed a connection with something called a luminar. The creatures are made of living crystal, and they have been slaves in the dragon mines for centuries. She clicked to another message. This one comes from the ocean world Aquatrice. A teenage girl named Osu bonded with one of the Thalassan people. They are fish-like beings who can breathe underwater. The dragons use them to harvest resources from the seafloor. More messages kept coming in, from desert worlds and ice planets, from space stations and asteroid mines. Everywhere humans had been taken as slaves, they were forming impossible connections with other species. Dr. Kim studied the reports with growing amazement. This changes everything we know about biology, she said. Humans seem to have some kind of natural ability to bridge the gaps between different species. We are like living translators, not just for language but for thoughts and emotions. Park Jin understood the bigger picture immediately. The Dragon Empire has kept all the slave species separated for thousands of years. They made sure different aliens could not communicate or work together. But now humans are connecting them. Through their bond, Sol felt Vorthak's memories of dragon history lessons. The Empire had always used a simple strategy: divide and conquer. Keep the slave species isolated so they could never unite against their masters. But humans were breaking down those barriers without even trying. We need to contact these other bonded pairs, Sol said. If we work together, we might be able to help more people escape. Li Da was already working on that problem. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she tried to establish secure communication channels. The Dragon military monitors most transmissions, but I think I can route messages through old mining equipment networks. They never bother checking those. While Li Da worked on communications, Choi Min was studying reports about the bonded pair's abilities. Each partnership seemed to have different powers. Nam Wu and his crystal partner could see through solid rock, making them perfect for finding hidden dragon weapon caches. Osu and her Thalassan friend could swim through underwater dragon bases without being detected. It is like each human brings out hidden abilities in their alien partner, Choi Min explained, and the aliens help humans think in new ways. Sol can understand dragon military tactics through Vorthak's knowledge. She plans our missions better than trained soldiers. This was true. Sol had been leading more rescue operations lately, and each one was more successful than the last. She seemed to know exactly where dragon guards would be and how they would react to different situations. Through Vorthak's dragon instincts, she understood their enemy better than they understood themselves. The first successful contact came from Captain Yoon Jae, a former Korean Space Force pilot, who had been captured during Earth's first contact with the dragons. He was now on a prison station orbiting the gas giant Cormax, where he had formed a bond with a creature called a Void Walker. The Void Walkers can move through space without ships, his message explained. My partner Nethys can carry me between asteroids instantly. We have been freeing prisoners from the mining stations and taking them to hidden bases on the outer planets. More contacts followed. Each bonded pair had found ways to use their unique abilities to fight back against the Empire. They were small rebellions scattered across thousands of light years, but they were all connected by the same impossible phenomenon. Li Da managed to establish a secret communication network linking dozens of bonded pairs. They called it the Awakening Network because it felt like the galaxy was waking up from a long sleep of oppression and fear. The network allowed the scattered resistance groups to coordinate their efforts. When Namwu discovered a dragon weapons factory on Xerion, Captain Yoon Jae's team could strike the supply convoys carrying materials to that factory. When Osu found underwater dragon bases, Park Jin's group could attack the surface installations that supported them. But the most important discovery came from an unexpected source. A teenage human girl named Seo Yoon had been working as a translator in the dragon capital when she bonded with a young dragon named Korvash. Unlike Vorthak, Korvash was a noble dragon, son of a regional governor. Through him, Seo Yoon had access to high-level dragon government communications. Her messages to the network were full of shocking information. The dragon nobles are divided, she reported. Many younger dragons are tired of constant war. They see how the bonded pairs work together and they want to understand this cooperation. Some dragons are secretly helping human slaves escape. This news created hope but also danger. If some dragons were questioning the Empire's ways, it meant the old system was weakening. But it also meant the Empire would fight harder to maintain control. War Commander Gorthak had indeed been hunting Sol and Vorthak through the underground tunnels. His soldiers had found several of the Resistance hideouts, though the humans always managed to escape before being captured. The commander was learning to adapt his tactics, using human unpredictability against them. During one close call, Sol and Vorthak had to flee deeper into the planet's core than anyone had ever gone before. In the deepest tunnels, they discovered something amazing: ancient dragon ruins that were older than the Empire itself. The walls were covered with carvings showing dragons living peacefully alongside other creatures. There were pictures of dragons and humans working together, of crystal beings and water creatures sharing knowledge, of all species helping each other reach for the stars. "This is how things used to be," Sol whispered, running her hand over the ancient stone. Through Vorthak she felt his wonder and sadness. His people had forgotten their own history of cooperation and peace. Dr. Kim was fascinated when Sol described the ruins. "Those carvings might be the key to understanding why humans can form these bonds," she said. "Maybe this ability is not new. Maybe it is very old, from a time when all species worked together." The discovery of the ancient ruins gave the Resistance new hope, but it also brought new dangers. War Commander Gorthak had finally tracked them to the deep tunnels. His army was descending into the planet's core, armed with weapons designed to fight in tight spaces. Worse, High Priest Maltharok had declared the bonded pairs to be an infection that threatened the natural order of the galaxy. He was calling for a holy war to eliminate all human-alien partnerships before they could spread further. But the awakening network had grown stronger too. Bonded pairs on 50 different worlds were now working together, sharing information and coordinating attacks. Captain Yunjae had started bringing freed slaves to a hidden world he called Haven, where different species were learning to live and work together. Sol stood in the ancient temple deep beneath Korvash, looking at stone carvings that showed her people's forgotten destiny. Around her, humans and friendly dragons prepared for the battle that was coming. Through the network, she could sense other bonded pairs facing similar fights across the galaxy. The Dragon Empire had ruled through fear and division for thousands of years. But now something new was growing in the darkness between the stars. It was small and fragile, but it was spreading like light through a long night. Sol placed her hand on Vorthak's warm scales and felt his strength flowing into her mind. Through their bond, she sensed the network of connections reaching across space, linking human hearts to alien souls in ways that defied everything the Empire believed about the natural order. The real war was just beginning, but for the first time since the dragons came to Earth, Sol believed they could win. Not through superior weapons or military tactics, but through something far more powerful: the simple courage to reach across the void and say to another being, "You are not alone." The ancient carvings on the walls seemed to glow in the light from Vorthak's scales, as if approving of what was to come. The galaxy was remembering how to dream of peace again. The sound of marching feet echoed through the deep tunnels as War Commander Gorthak's army descended toward the ancient ruins. Sol pressed her back against the carved stone wall, feeling Vorthak's warm scales against her shoulder. Through their bond, she sensed his growing power and determination. The young dragon was now fully grown, his silver scales gleaming like metal in the dim light. Above them, the Dragon Empire was beginning to tear itself apart. News came through the awakening network that shocked everyone in the Resistance. Prince Korveth, heir to the Empire and son of Emperor Malthrax himself, had publicly questioned his father's orders to destroy all bonded pairs. Li Da read the intercepted communication with amazement. Prince Korveth refused to attack the bonded pair on Zerion. He told his father that Namwu and the crystal being had saved a dragon mining crew from a cave collapse. He said killing creatures who save dragon lives makes no sense. Dr. Kim looked up from her research notes. The prince is not the only one having doubts. I have been studying reports from across the Empire. Younger dragons everywhere are asking questions about the old ways. This news filled Sol with hope, but also worry. If the dragon nobles were divided, it meant the Empire might collapse. But it could also mean a civil war that would destroy entire star systems. Through Vorthak's memories, she knew how terrible dragon civil wars could be. Park Jin gathered the resistance leaders around the ancient altar, where Sul had first touched the carved walls. "We have a choice to make," he said. "We can hide down here and wait for the Empire to destroy itself, or we can try to guide what comes next." "What do you mean?" Choi Min asked. "I mean we offer the dragons something they have never had before," Park Jin replied. "A way to change without destroying everything. Sol and Vorthak have shown that dragons and humans can work together. Maybe we can show them a better way to live." Sul felt the weight of this responsibility through her bond with Vorthak. The young dragon's thoughts were full of memories from his noble education, lessons about dragon history and culture that he had learned before being marked as cursed. He knew things about the Empire that could help them understand what was happening. Through Vorthak, Sol learned that many young dragons had been secretly meeting to discuss the old stories about cooperation between species. These dragons remembered the ancient carvings in temples across the Empire, images of dragons working alongside other creatures instead of ruling over them. "There is someone we need to meet," Sul said suddenly. "Vorthak knows about a group of young dragons who gather in the old temple district. They call themselves the New Scale Brotherhood. They want to learn about the ancient ways." Park Jin looked concerned. "Meeting with dragons seems very dangerous. How do we know we can trust them?" "We don't," Sul admitted. "But if we want to change things, we have to take risks." Li Da had been monitoring dragon communications all day. Her face grew pale as she read the latest messages. "War Commander Gorthak is not just hunting us anymore," she said. "He has declared the New Scale Brotherhood to be traitors. He plans to arrest them all tonight." Sul made her decision quickly. Through her bond with Vorthak, she felt his agreement. "We have to warn them," she said. "If the young dragons who want peace are destroyed, there will be no one left to help us change the Empire." The plan was dangerous but simple. Sol and Vorthak would fly to the old temple district, while the resistance fighters created a distraction on the other side of the city. Vorthak was now large enough to carry Sol on his back, and his silver scales could disrupt the dragon detection systems. Flying through the red sky of Corvash was like riding a shooting star. Vorthak's powerful wings carried them silently between the massive temple spires. Below them, dragon guards patrolled the streets, but their scanners could not detect the silver dragon whose scales bent light and energy in impossible ways. They landed on the roof of the Temple of Ancient Wisdom, one of the oldest buildings on the planet. Inside, Sol could hear voices speaking in the formal dragon language used for religious ceremonies. But these voices sounded different from the harsh commands she had heard from dragon soldiers. These voices were asking questions, not giving orders. Sol and Vorthak climbed down through a broken skylight into the temple's main chamber. About 20 young dragons sat in a circle around glowing crystals that provided soft light. They were reading from ancient books and discussing what the old texts meant. When Sul and Vorthak appeared, the dragons did not attack or call for guards. Instead, they stared in wonder at the silver dragon and the human girl who rode on his back. One dragon, slightly larger than the others, stepped forward. "I am Corvash, son of Governor Malthan," he said in perfect Korean. "Are you the bonded pair from the temple ritual? The one who started all this change?" "Yes," Sul replied, sliding down from Vorthak's back. "We came to warn you. War Commander Gorthak is coming to arrest all of you tonight." The young dragons looked at each other with worry but not surprise. "We knew this day would come," Corvash said. "We have been reading the forbidden texts, learning about the time before the Empire when dragons lived in harmony with other species. The older dragons call this heresy." "What will you do?" Sol asked. "We will not hide," another young dragon said. Her scales were deep blue and her eyes held the same determination Sul had seen in human resistance fighters. "My name is Lithera. I have been studying the bonded pairs across the galaxy. What you and your humans have accomplished is remarkable. You have shown us what we could become if we stopped being afraid." Through Vorthak, Sol felt the other dragons' emotions. They were scared but hopeful. They wanted to believe in a better future, but they did not know how to fight against thousands of years of tradition and the power of the old dragons who controlled the Empire. "There is something you should know," Corvash said quietly. "Prince Corvath has been in secret communication with us. He wants to meet with bonded pairs from different worlds. He believes the Empire must change or it will destroy itself." This news was more shocking than anything they had heard before. The heir to the Dragon Empire wanted to meet with humans and their alien partners. It could be the chance for peace they had been hoping for. or it could be a trap that would destroy the entire resistance. Before Sol could respond, alarms began ringing throughout the city. Dragon military aircraft flew overhead, their searchlights cutting through the red sky. War Commander Gorthak had begun his attack earlier than expected. "We have to leave now," Sol said, but Corvash shook his massive head. "No," he said. "We stay and face what comes. But first, we make a choice that will echo across the galaxy." The young dragon turned to his companions. "Brothers and sisters of the new scale, tonight we choose between the old ways and the new. Tonight we decide whether dragons will remain conquerors or become partners." One by one, the young dragons stood up. They spoke ancient words that Forthak translated for Sul. "We renounce the path of domination. We choose the path of cooperation. We reject the empire of fear and choose the future of hope." As they spoke, something amazing happened. Light began to flow between the dragons, connecting them in a network similar to what Sul and Vorthak shared. But this was different. This was dragons choosing to bond with each other, creating a brotherhood based on shared ideals instead of shared blood. The light grew brighter as more dragons joined the ceremony. Sol realized they were witnessing the birth of something new. Dragons who could work together not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. War Commander Gorthak's soldiers broke down the temple doors just as the ceremony completed. They poured into the chamber with weapons ready, expecting to find a group of confused young dragons discussing old books. Instead, they found something that terrified them. Dragons who stood united by choice rather than command. "By order of the High Command, you are all under arrest for sedition and heresy," Gorthak announced, his red eyes blazing with fury. Behind him stood 50 heavily armed dragon soldiers. Corvash stepped forward to face the war commander. "We do not resist arrest," he said calmly, "but we do not recognize the authority of those who rule through fear and murder. You will when you are chained in the execution chambers," Gorthak snarled. But as his soldiers moved to capture the young dragons, Sol and Vorthak stepped into the circle of light that connected the new-scale brotherhood. Their bond merged with the network of dragon connections, creating something the galaxy had never seen before, a partnership between species that transcended individual relationships. The merged light filled the temple and spread outward through the city. Every dragon in Corvash felt it, from the oldest priest to the youngest hatchling. For the first time in centuries, dragons experienced what it felt like to be truly connected to others without domination or submission. Some dragons rejected the feeling and tried to block it out, but others, especially the younger ones, embraced it with joy. In that moment, the Dragon Empire split in two: those who clung to the old ways of conquest and control, and those who reached toward a new future of cooperation and understanding. War Commander Gorthak staggered backward as the light touched him. Through the network, he felt the emotions of every slave his armies had taken, every creature his orders had killed. The weight of that suffering nearly drove him to his knees. "What have you done?" he whispered. "We have shown the truth," Sul replied, her voice carrying the strength of every bonded pair across the galaxy. "Dragons are not meant to be alone. No one is meant to be alone." The civil war that would reshape the galaxy had begun not with weapons and armies, but with a choice made by young hearts who refused to accept that cruelty was the natural order of things. And across the stars, other bonded pairs felt the network growing stronger, carrying the message that change was possible and hope was spreading, like wildfire through the darkness of space. 6 months had passed since the iced night in the Temple of Ancient Wisdom when the Dragon Empire split apart. The galaxy was now burning with civil war, but it was unlike any war that had ever been fought. On one side stood the old empire under Emperor Malthrax and High Priest Maltharak, clinging to centuries of tradition built on conquest and fear. On the other side was something completely new: the Galactic Cooperation Council. Sol stood on the bridge of the ship Haven's Light, looking out at the most amazing sight she had ever seen. Dozens of different spacecraft floated in space around them, each one carrying refugees from across the galaxy. Dragon ships flew alongside human vessels. Crystal beings from Zirion traveled in ships that looked like floating gems. The aquatic thalassans had brought their water-filled spheres that moved through space like soap bubbles. Vorthak landed beside her, his massive wings folding against his silver-scaled body. He was now larger than any dragon she had ever seen, but his gentle blue eyes remained the same. Through their bond, she felt his wonder at what they had built together. "The council meeting is about to begin," he said, his voice now deep and powerful like distant thunder. Saul nodded and walked toward the main conference chamber. A year ago, she had been a 10-year-old slave girl watching a dragon hatchling await death. Now she was 16 and served as humanity's primary representative to an alliance that spanned half the galaxy. The conference chamber was a marvel of cooperation. The room had been designed to accommodate dozens of different species. There were perches for flying creatures, pools for aquatic beings, and special atmosphere zones for those who breathed different gases. At the center sat a round table where no one position was higher than any other. Captain Yoon Jae was already there, representing the human military forces that had joined the council. Beside him sat Nethys, his Void Walker partner, a creature that looked like living shadow but radiated warmth and kindness. Nam Wu had grown into a strong young man, his crystal partner gleaming like a rainbow beside him. The biggest surprise was seeing Prince Corveth sitting at the table. He had officially renounced his claim to the Empire throne and joined the council 6 months ago. Many dragons had followed him, creating a split in the Empire's military that grew larger every day. "Welcome, friends," Prince Corveth said as Sul and Vorthak took their seats. "Today we face the most important decision in galactic history." Dr. Kim Hay, now the Council's chief science advisor, stood up with a data pad in her hands. "Emperor Malthrax has issued an ultimatum," she announced. "He demands that all bonded pairs surrender themselves within 1 week, or he will begin destroying entire star systems to stop what he calls the infection of cooperation." The chamber fell silent. Through the network that connected all bonded pairs, Sul could feel the fear and determination of her friends across the galaxy. They had always known this moment would come. The old Empire would rather destroy everything than allow change. "He has the weapons to do it," Captain Yoon Jae said grimly. "The Empire built planet-killer devices during the early days of conquest. They have been stored on the fortress world of Draxos for thousands of years." Prince Corveth's scales darkened with shame. "I know those weapons," he said. "My father helped design them when he was young. They were meant to be used only if the Empire faced complete destruction. But now he sees the spread of cooperation as exactly that threat." Sul felt anger rising in her chest, but through Vorthak's calm presence, she controlled it. Anger would not help them now. They needed wisdom. "We cannot surrender," she said, her voice steady despite her young age. "Too many people have already died for the chance to live free. But we also cannot let him destroy innocent worlds." "Then what do you propose?" asked Corvash, the blue-scaled dragon who had become leader of the New-Scale Brotherhood. Saul looked around the table at the faces of beings from dozens of different worlds. Each one had risked everything for the dream of a galaxy where cooperation replaced conquest. She thought about the ancient carvings beneath Corvash that showed different species working together among the stars. "We challenge him to formal debate," she said. "Dragons respect the old laws. Emperor Malthrax cannot refuse a formal challenge to his authority, especially one made in front of the entire galaxy." The suggestion caused excited discussion around the table. Prince Corveth looked thoughtful. "It could work," he said slowly. "The old laws require the Emperor to accept challenges to imperial policy, especially challenges involving religious doctrine. If we frame this as a theological debate about the true nature of strength and honor, he would have to accept." Dr. Kim was already working on her data pad. "We can use the galaxy-wide communication network to broadcast the debate to every inhabited world. Let all species hear both sides and decide for themselves." "But who would speak for our side?" Nam Wu asked. "The Emperor is ancient and cunning. He has studied dragon law for thousands of years." Sol felt Vorthak's thoughts merging with her own. Through their bond, she had access to all his memories of dragon history and culture. But more than that, she had the experiences of every bonded pair in the network. She carried the wisdom of dozens of species in her mind. "I will debate him," Sul said quietly. The chamber erupted in worried voices. She was still young, still human, still just a girl who had once thrown herself in front of a ritual knife to save a dragon hatchling. "Sul," Park Jin said gently. He had become like a father to her during their time in the Resistance. "The Emperor will try to crush you with words. He knows every trick of dragon debate. But I know something he does not," Sul replied. "I know what it feels like to be connected to others without controlling them. I know the strength that comes from cooperation instead of domination. And I will not debate him alone." She placed her hand on Vorthak's warm scales. Around the table, other bonded pairs did the same with their partners. The network of connections that had grown from their first touch in the temple now linked hundreds of pairs across the galaxy. "We will all speak together," Sol continued. "Every voice that has been silenced by the Empire will be heard through us." The plan took shape quickly. The debate would be held on the neutral world of Sanctuary, a planet that had declared independence from both the Empire and the Council. Ancient dragon law required that such debates be held in person, with no weapons or technology beyond simple recording devices. Emperor Malthrax accepted the challenge with contempt. To him, it was just another chance to demonstrate the superiority of dragon wisdom over the foolish ideas of lesser species. He announced that he would bring High Priest Maltharak as his advisor. Along with the greatest dragon scholars in the Empire, Sol spent the next week in preparation, but not by studying old books or memorizing arguments. Instead, she opened her mind completely to the network of bonded pairs. She let their experiences flow through her. The joy of a Thalassan swimmer teaching a human child to breathe underwater, the wonder of a crystal being sharing its geological memories with its human partner, the fierce loyalty of void walkers who had learned to love instead of just hunt. The day of the debate arrived with storms covering Sanctuary's sky. The debate hall was ancient, carved from a single massive tree that had died millennia ago. Representatives from every known species filled the curved chambers, some attending in person, others participating through holographic projection. Emperor Malthrax entered the hall like a force of nature. He was enormous even for a dragon, his black scales seeming to absorb light. His red eyes burned with the fury of a creature who had ruled absolutely for thousands of years. Behind him walked High Priest Maltharak and a dozen of the Empire's most learned dragons. Sol walked into the hall accompanied only by Vorthak. She looked tiny beside the massive dragons, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. Through the network, she felt the support of every being who had ever dared to dream of freedom. The debate began with the traditional forms. Emperor Malthrax spoke first, his voice echoing through the chamber like thunder from an approaching storm. "I am Malthrax, Emperor of the Dragon Empire, master of 10,000 worlds, commander of the greatest military force the galaxy has ever known. I have ruled for 5,000 years, bringing order to chaos and strength to weakness." He gestured toward Sol with one massive claw. This child and her pet dragon claim to offer something better than the system that has brought peace and prosperity to the galaxy. They speak of cooperation and partnership, but these are just pretty words that hide weakness and disorder. The Emperor's voice grew louder, filling the chamber with its power. "The natural order is clear. The strong rule the weak, the wise guide the foolish, the superior command the inferior. This has been true since the first dragon learned to fly. To change this order is to invite chaos and destruction." When he finished speaking, the chamber was silent. The Emperor's presence was overwhelming, his authority undeniable. He had ruled the galaxy longer than some species had existed. Who could stand against such power? Sol stood up slowly and walked to the center of the chamber. She looked small and young compared to the ancient Emperor. But when she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every corner of the hall. "My name is Han Sol," she said simply. 1 year ago I was a slave. 6 months ago I was a refugee. Today I speak not just as a human, but as part of something larger than any one species. She placed her hand on Vorthak's scales, and the silver dragon's body began to glow with soft light. Around the chamber, other bonded pairs did the same. The light spread and connected, creating a network that everyone present could see and feel. "Emperor Malthrax speaks of strength through domination," Sol continued. "But I have seen a different kind of strength. The strength of a dragon hatchling who chose compassion over revenge. The strength of soldiers who chose to protect instead of conquer. The strength of different species choosing to work together instead of fighting each other." The network of light pulsed brighter as Sol spoke, and through it, everyone in the chamber could feel the emotions and memories of the bonded pairs. They felt the joy of cooperation, the power of understanding, the hope of building something better. "The Emperor says the strong must rule the weak," Sol said, her young voice growing stronger. "But what if there are no weak and strong? What if there are only different kinds of strength that become more powerful when they work together?" She gestured to the diverse crowd in the chamber. "Look around you. Crystal beings who can see through solid matter, aquatic species who can survive in the depths of space, dragons who can fly between stars, Humans who can bridge the gaps between different minds and hearts. Each of us has gifts that others need. Each of us has wisdom that others lack. The light from the bonded network now filled the entire chamber, and Emperor Malthrax stepped back from its radiance. For the first time in millennia, he felt something he had forgotten: doubt. Sol's final words rang through the chamber like a bell calling people to awakening. The question is not whether the strong should rule the weak. The question is whether we will choose to be strong together, or weak alone. The debate that would determine the fate of the galaxy had only just begun, but in that moment, everyone present knew that the old world was ending and something new was about to be born. The debate continued for 3 days. Emperor Malthrax spoke with the power of ancient authority, quoting laws that were old when stars were young. He reminded the galaxy of the chaos that had existed before the Dragon Empire brought order. He painted pictures of what would happen if the strong did not guide the weak: endless wars, dying civilizations, darkness spreading across the stars. But Sul answered each argument not with words from old books, but with living examples of cooperation. Through the network of bonded pairs, she showed the galaxy what different species could accomplish when they worked together. Crystal beings and humans had developed new technologies in months that dragons had not imagined in centuries. Aquatic species and voidwalkers had mapped regions of space that had been unknown for millennia. On the second day, High Priest Maltharok tried to use ancient dragon magic to influence the minds of those watching the debate. He began chanting in the old language, calling upon Malthrax the war god to demonstrate the power of traditional dragon ways. But when his magic touched the network of bonded pairs, something unexpected happened. Instead of bending their minds to his will, the magic was transformed by their connections into something else entirely. The harsh red energy of domination became a gentle golden light of understanding that spread throughout the debate hall. Emperor Malthrax stared in shock as his priests' magic turned against everything they believed. "What sorcery is this?" he demanded. Sol smiled gently. "It is not sorcery, Emperor. It is what happens when power is shared instead of hoarded. Your priest's magic is strong. But when it touches hearts that are connected to others, it becomes something greater than he intended." The watching galaxy saw dragons trying to use magic to control minds, and they saw humans and their partners transforming that magic into light that brought understanding instead of obedience. The contrast was clear to everyone. On the third day, Emperor Malthrax made his final argument. His voice shook the ancient debate hall as he spoke of the burden of leadership, the loneliness of command, the responsibility of making hard choices that lesser beings could not understand. "You speak of cooperation," he said, his red eyes fixed on Sul. "But cooperation requires someone to make the final decisions. When worlds are burning and enemies attack, there is no time for discussion and debate. There must be a voice that speaks with absolute authority, a power that can act without hesitation. That is what the Empire provides." Sul stood up for her final response. She was no longer the frightened 10-year-old who had thrown herself in front of a ritual knife. 6 years of leading the resistance had made her strong and wise beyond her age. But more than that, she carried within her mind the experiences and wisdom of hundreds of bonded pairs across the galaxy. "You are right, Emperor," she said, surprising everyone in the chamber. "Leadership is necessary. Difficult decisions must be made. But you make one terrible mistake." She walked closer to the massive dragon ruler, showing no fear. "You believe that strength comes from standing alone, from making others obey your will. But I have learned something different. True strength comes from connecting with others, from understanding their needs and dreams, from making them part of something greater than themselves." The network light pulsed brighter around Sol and Vorthak. "When I was 10 years old, I had a choice. I could let fear control me, or I could choose to act with love. When I chose love, I discovered that I was not alone. Vorthak and I became stronger together than either of us could ever be apart." She gestured to the diverse crowd filling the chamber. "That same choice faces all of us now. We can choose fear of what is different, or we can choose the courage to connect with others who are not like us. We can choose to rule through force, or we can choose to lead through understanding." Emperor Malthrax raised himself to his full height, towering over Sol like a mountain of black scales and burning eyes. "Pretty words, child. But when the enemies come, when the systems fail, when chaos threatens to consume everything, your cooperation will crumble. Only absolute power can maintain order." Sol looked up at him without fear. Through her bond with Vorthak and the network beyond, she felt the support of millions of beings who had chosen hope over fear. "Then let us test that belief," she said quietly. As she spoke, alarms began sounding across the planet. Emergency broadcasts filled every communication channel. A massive fleet of unknown warships had appeared at the edge of the galaxy, moving toward inhabited systems with clear hostile intent. The Devourers had returned, ancient beyond measure. The Devourers were creatures of pure hunger that consumed entire worlds to fuel their endless journey through space. They had last appeared 10,000 years ago, before even the Dragon Empire existed. The old record said they had destroyed countless civilizations before finally departing for the void between galaxies. Now they were back, and their fleet was 1,000 times larger than before. Terror filled the debate hall as reports flooded in. The Devourer ships were the size of moons, covered in organic armor that seemed to heal itself. Their weapons could crack planets open like eggs. No single species had ever successfully fought them. Emperor Malthrax smiled coldly. "You see, this is why the galaxy needs absolute rule. Only the Dragon Empire has the military power to face a threat like this. Your cooperation and understanding mean nothing against creatures that exist only to consume." But Sol was already connected to the network, coordinating with bonded pairs across the galaxy. Through hundreds of partnerships, information flowed faster than any military communication system. Crystal beings provided deep space intelligence. Voidwalkers scouted the enemy fleet. Aquatic species analyzed the aliens' technology using senses no other species possessed. "You are wrong, Emperor," Sol said, her eyes now glowing with the reflected light of the network. "We do not need absolute power to face this threat. We need something far more powerful: absolute cooperation." What happened next had never been seen before in galactic history. Every bonded pair in the galaxy linked their consciousness together, creating a single mind that spanned thousands of light years. Through this connection, they began coordinating the defense of entire star systems. Human tactical brilliance merged with dragon firepower, Crystal being Earth sense combined with Voidwalker space navigation. Aquatic species adaptation abilities joined with the technology mastery of a dozen other races. Instead of fighting as separate armies, they fought as a single organism with millions of parts working in perfect harmony. The Devourers had expected to face scattered, frightened civilizations fighting desperately to save themselves. Instead, they encountered something they had never seen before: multiple species acting as one, sharing strength and knowledge instantly across vast distances. Dragon ships carried human tacticians who could predict enemy movements. Crystal beings guided weapons with geological precision. Voidwalkers appeared behind enemy lines carrying warriors from a dozen different species. The defense was unlike anything the galaxy had ever mounted. Emperor Malthrax watched from Sanctuary as reports came in of impossible victories. Devourer fleets that had never been stopped were being turned back by forces they could not understand or counter. The cooperation he had dismissed as weakness was proving stronger than the absolute power he had spent millennia building. The war lasted 6 months. When it ended, the Devourer fleet was retreating back to the void, their forces scattered and their hunger unsatisfied. They had faced something they could not consume: the united will of billions of beings who refused to surrender to fear. 5 years later, Sol stood in the garden of New Corvash, watching children from dozens of different species play together under the light of twin suns. Vorthak lay beside her, his silver scales now gleaming with threads of gold that had appeared after the war with the Devourers. Through their bond, she felt his contentment and joy. The Dragon Empire had not been destroyed. Instead, it had been transformed. Emperor Malthrax had abdicated after the war, finally understanding that his way of absolute rule could never have defeated the Devourers. Prince Corvith now led the dragons as first speaker rather than emperor, guiding instead of commanding. The galaxy had become something unprecedented, a true cooperative civilization where each species contributed its unique gifts to the common good. The old ritual chambers where hatchlings had once faced death were now nurseries, where young beings from all species learned together. Park Jin approached through the garden, his hair now completely white but his eyes still bright with hope. "The Council has approved the new exploration program," he said. "Mixed species crews will begin mapping the outer regions next month." Sol nodded, watching as a young human girl helped a dragon hatchling learn to fly. The hatchling's scales were silver like Vorthax, but instead of being marked as cursed, he was celebrated as a sign of the new age of cooperation. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not acted that day in the temple? Vorthak asked, his voice a gentle rumble. Saul considered the question. Through the network that still connected all bonded pairs, she could feel the contentment and hope of millions of beings living in freedom and cooperation. She could sense exploration fleets carrying mixed crews to discover new worlds and new species to welcome into their growing family. No, she said finally. I do not wonder about what might have been. I am too busy enjoying what is. Above them, ships from dozens of worlds crossed the sky in formations that would have been impossible under the old empire. Dragons flew alongside crystal beings that gleamed like living stars. Human pilots worked in harmony with voidwalkers who could navigate the spaces between realities. The universe, Saul realized, had not been waiting for conquerors or rulers. It had been waiting for bridge builders. For those with the courage to reach across the void between species and say the most powerful words in any language. You are not alone. A small dragon hatchling approached Sul, his silver scales catching the sunlight. He was the same age Vorthak had been when they first met, but instead of chains and fear, this hatchling carried toys and wore the comfortable confidence of a child who had never known anything but love and acceptance. Teacher Saul, the hatchling said in perfect Korean, will you tell us the story again? About the girl and the dragon who changed everything? Saul smiled and gathered the children around her. Beings from a dozen different worlds who saw each other not as aliens or enemies, but as friends and family. As she began the familiar story, she felt Vorthak's warmth beside her, and the gentle presence of the network that connected all their hearts. The galaxy had learned to dream of peace again, and those dreams were becoming reality among the stars.